Welcome to The Link. This is a program all about linking you with the resources in your community. I'm Joanie Sutter, your host. I'd like you to meet my guest, Mark Thomas, the new Marketing and Public Relations Specialist for the City of Bristol, working for the Bristol Development Authority's Executive Director, Justin Malley. Mark comes with 30 years of marketing experience, ready to promote the city inside and out. Mark, thank you so much for being on the
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here,
today.
Joanie.
So happy to have you. You started in December, and already over 22 different initiatives have been implemented.
A lot, and we've still got a long way to go, but some things were easy to do, and the number's impressive, and I feel pretty good about it, but, I'm looking at the 38, 39 other things that we have to do like everybody else.
Before we start with actually marketing the city and what it means to market a city, let's talk a little bit about the Bristol Development Authority.
Okay.
Justin Malley is the executive director, as I mentioned, wonderful person, and I'm sure you enjoy working with him very much in the office staff. But the Development Authority is really there to improve the physical, the economic, and the social environment that is Bristol.
It really is. It's really to improve the quality of life, and that could be different things to different people. A lot of it is bring new business in. I think it's also important that isn't forgotten, certainly not by Justin and the staff, is that there are already people that have already put all their chips in to say, Bristol's my home and this is what I'm going to serve. And so we've got to make sure that the current business owners are supported. And then it goes into a lot of the other things that we do as grants. We fight blight right along with the city, but kind of in a nutshell, ours is to make Bristol, everybody should be proud of it and want to call it home, and that's what we try to do.
So outside of economic development, which I know that repurposing buildings, some of the recent things that have gone on is discussions around Memorial Boulevard School, the upgrading of the Route 6 corridor, which I understand from Joey Garlick's on down is going to be some big changes. The West End.
Right.
Is a big one. Wonderful, wonderful West End, really. I mean, with a lot of history and a lot of great businesses. Southside Market is one that comes to mind.
There's a lot of unique things in Bristol, and that I know we'll talk about this later, but as I told you, I've lived in quite a few cities, and I think everybody says they're unique. I believe Bristol is. It's got a history. It's a big sports town, but it also has got all these kind of hidden treasures. And I think that you either forget about those or you may take them for granted if you grew up here. You're a Bristol native, and I think it would be easy to go, oh yeah, and not remember it. But they're progressing as well, and I think that it's always progressing. A lot of cities can't say that. The little town I grew up in, God love it, and it's still home, is still probably caught in the 60s, where I don't feel that way about Bristol whatsoever. I don't get that feel. I certainly don't get the passion like you do in Bristol.
Mm-hmm. And I wonder, being new to the position that you hold in Bristol, and so really kind of getting enmeshed in everything that is Bristol, you also see a big veterans component here.
Absolutely.
The Memorial Boulevard, obviously, but there's a lot of support for our veterans in Bristol, and I'm sure that you see that. You've lived in a lot of different places.
I have.
How many states?
12 states. I grew up in the Midwest, and so I've got to see a lot of the country. I've been in all 50 states and 13 countries, and so it kind of gives you a little bit different perspective, which again, this is where I'm going to retire. This is where we've called home, and our last stop, as my wife and I say. And there's a good reason for that. It has to do with the people. It has to do with the progressive nature. It has to do with, again, about Bristol, it's unique in the fact that it treasures small town values, but then it's still a town of 60,000, so there's a lot to do. We're trying to get that a little bit bigger and to do that. So it's very unique. The school system is outstanding. The city is very healthy, which I know is on the minds of a lot of people in not only the United States, but specifically in Connecticut. And so I felt like Bristol is really an outstanding place to be. And it's really gonna be fun to see how we answer these challenges that are coming up.
So how do you market a city?
It's not that different, believe it or not, than a product, because you have to have a brand, you have to have a promise and an equity. I think the uniqueness of the nature is the passion that you get in. If you get into a major brand, and I worked for Volvo, and I worked for DuPont, and I worked for Continental Airlines for a long time, I don't see the passion in a brand and a company, certainly with some people and certainly at the top, but they're like you. You never moved away. I don't live anywhere near Kansas City. There's a reason for that, because it's the people that you want to be around. They're things that you care about. And as I've gone kind of through the first 90 days to look around, there are people that are constantly, what else can I do? And nobody has any extra time, and everybody's got to make a living. But I meet the people that are on the city council, and then the people that are volunteering. You've got the All Hearts Squad. The things are very unique to Bristol, and it's infectious. I talked to my wife, and she says, you know, I've never seen you get into something like this, and you've worked for all these big names and brands. And I said, you know, I feel like Bristol's my home, you know, because I've heard the history. I hear all of the things that go on. I've heard the challenges. You talk about World War I, World War II, and all the way through Vietnam, and the, you know, the conflicts that we're still trying to protect around the world. And it's an all-American city. I know how corny that sounds, but if you talk to the people, and you grew up there, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know that a lot of the viewers, you know, this is home, and this is where they're going to stay, and they don't want to move. There's a reason for that. And I think to market the city is extremely important, because our society is changing. I mean, we see that with the struggles that the state is having. We're in a great spot. We have all of these natural resources with all our parks. We have museums. A lot of people just can't say the natural things that we have. And then you add the passion of that people. It's just something extremely unique. So every day I go in, and I don't anticipate this changing. I never had the same day twice.
Oh, and I don't think you ever will.
No,
I don't think so.
you go in and you think you know what your day is, and something will completely change. Most of the time it's for the better.
When we look at, let's just look at a little bit of the history of the marketing position for Bristol. Has there been one?
There has been in the recent past, but I think you're seeing, you know, you had a new rebranding of New Britain. You see around, you know, there's a big push down in Stamford and things like that. There is a lot of competition to get business, and thriving business, and diversity of businesses in manufacturing, which we have a great heritage in Bristol with clockmaking. But how do you stay progressive and, you know, get the Otis elevators, and you get the Stanleys and the high-tech people to come in, and then you have to have the infrastructure. So you have to kind of say, this is what we're about, and this is what we mean, and this is how we are going to support you. And the city does that pretty well with the incentives that they have. But the competition is out there, so it's not that unlike any other product that you've been around. You do have competitors. You know, there's a lot of good places people could choose to call home, whether it's a residence, or it's an industrial section, or it's a small town business. And so we have to say, here's why you need to come here, and this is how we'll support you. And I got taught a real good lesson at DuPont that, you know, a lot of people talk about partnering, and then a partner means there's equal responsibility, and there's equal risk and you know, investment, you know. And so don't say you're a partner when all I'm doing is selling you. And so the city has done that very well, and I think we've seen that how well Bristol is doing is a result of that, and some forward thinking. A lot of communities that you go around, not just in New England, but around the country, you know, they're just saying, oh, well, maybe we should market. I mean, you have to do that, because when somebody's thinking about moving their business, that means they're moving employees. They're moving, you know, investments in real estate, and there's a lot of implications that can't be taken lightly, and it's a long process. And that's why the BDA, you know, if you get 2 or 3 businesses, those are huge wins, because they're month-long processes. And I don't think people think that, well, we're just going to move this building. Any business owner knows it's not that easy.
No, and as important it is to try to keep the business that's already established itself there.
Absolutely.
And not want them to move out. So when you came into the position, it sounds like you had something to put your your hands on, but also a lot of really new ideas, a lot of new initiatives, because I don't think the marketing component was a very strong marketing component, and now you're bringing a lot of new ideas. Can you talk about some of the 22, and I know there's been more than that, but
Right,
I'm going to
right.
hold on to the 22. What are some of the key initiatives that you've been able to accomplish in
Well,
a very short period?
You bring up a good point because the position has changed. It was a shared position that was joint with the city and the Chamber of Commerce, and the city decided to take that over. With that means a change in direction, which meant, I'd say the most notable change is that we were trying to bring businesses in. When I looked at it as a strategic marketing professional, it became clear to me that we've got about 7 audiences, and there's primary and there's secondary. Primary, obviously, is business owners that want to move, so they're the prospects. To me, the next 2 most important are the current residents and the current businesses. To me, I have to satisfy those. But then you have prospective residents, because if they're going to move here with the town, we want them to, live, eat, and breathe and play here. The other thing is tourism. We have so many good museums and lake compounds, and of course everybody likes to talk about ESPN, and why not, that they want to see that, so you've got tourists. Well, how do you get tourists here? Well, you talk to real estate agents, you talk to travel agents. So those are the 7 kind of primary ones, and each has just a little bit different take. And so where do you do your priorities? And so what I did is say, let's go with the 3 most important to get businesses here, our residents obviously to live here, and the current businesses. And then as we get into the summer, we can do some things. So one of the things, and one of my main duties is that I am kind of the webmaster, if you will, but it's really more of directing the content for BristolAllHeart.com. And that is really where you go when you want to know where to go.
Is that the brand of the city?
It is. The marketing committee was established about 4 or 5 years ago from the city of Bristol, and they commissioned a really good study. And normally research is flawed, but I went through it. It was a company out of Tennessee called North Star. And I think they hit Bristol. It was the good, the bad, wasn't very much ugly, but what it came up to is that there were hidden gems. There were people that were passionate. They were people that cared about each other and made sure that they cared about their neighbors. Again, as corny, as old-fashioned as that sound, it actually was true. And as I read this, I said, okay, these are good points. Some of them might have seemed very, insert your logo here, and everybody says that. But then you go around Bristol and you meet people and you hear the history, and go back to Muzzy Field. My father used to play pro baseball. I knew about Muzzy Field
I saw
before
Jim Rice play there.
and there's a ton of those type stories. And so you actually did see All Heart, and All Heart meant we welcome you. We're not. I've lived in places where that were very closed and niche, and I never felt a part of it.
You weren't a native, right?
I already feel like I'm part of Bristol. And that's because of the people. It wasn't the buildings. It wasn't, any kind of attraction that was there. And it really is when you walk down the street, and I'm out probably 3 days out of the week where I'm meeting businesses and doing that part of the changes. I'm listening to say, okay, what's your perception? Of course, that's a lot of different agendas about what they do. But as far as the changes, we needed to improve Bristol All Heart. We had to update the content. We had to make it a little bit more user-friendly. We also had to do some back-end things that made sure with somebody said, well, why Bristol? Or what to do with Bristol? Or if you were coming to the tournament at Giamatti, what am I going to do when I'm going to be there 3 days? So we had to make that site very vibrant. I think we've done that, and maybe the biggest change that most people will see is when you go to Bristol All Heart, the first thing that comes up, this is what's happening this week. We've also put in there doing business in Bristol, and we promoted the Startup Bristol competition, which is very unique for not only Connecticut, but most of the United States that's just completed. And so those are things we had to do. Our social media properties all intertwine in that. So we have 3 Facebook pages. And so we've got Bristol All Heart, we've got Bristol Development Authority, and we've got Startup Bristol. And so Bristol All Heart really is aimed at residents and current businesses. Mm-hmm. When you get into the BDA page or the Bristol Development Authority, that's more business. This is what's going on at the Southeast Business Park. This is why you should come to business, or this is how you can be a better small business person. And then the third one is Startup Bristol, which is very, kind of cyclical, is that when the competition is going on, which is normally the first part of the year, and we're giving away the grant money, we're heavily involved in that, but that'll go away, and we'll just kind of post it on that. So the strategy really is to make sure the messaging is right, the messaging is going through the right channels, whether it's to a resident or a business, and then make sure it's valuable information, we stay current.
Do you fund a lot of your own initiatives in the BDA?
It comes out of the city budget. It goes through city financing, and of course goes and then finally is
grant
voted
writing,
upon by the city council and the mayor. But yeah, the grants are, and that's a whole complicated process that I think they're very thankful I'm not involved in, that I'm going to promote the city. But yes, it's, the way it works is we come up with a plan. We rationalize the plan, which was just adopted about a month ago. Unanimously, which I was very proud of, but that was through the marketing committee, and then the marketing committee goes through the BDA board. The BDA board is made up with volunteers and some city councilmen. They approve that, then it goes to the city council and goes through that. So, I mean, it is government. You do have to go through these processes. There's public input all the way through, and we need to listen to that, and we do listen to that.
How important is that marketing plan?
It depends who you ask. I would tell you that there is so much competition, and if people are actually paying attention, you're seeing a lot of marketing departments start to spring up and be very vocal and changing logos and taglines and that type of thing. Bristol was already ahead of that. All Heart has been around for a couple of years, so I think the city was very progressively thinking about how do we stay ahead of this, and positioned right because the city's in good financial shape. The school system is unbelievable. And so those are things you can't just do overnight. And so the city and the school system has made these building blocks with the workforce, whether it be technical or, some kind of college, and go through there. So, I mean, it's got all the elements. And so now it's like, okay, who's going to tell the story? And that's when I came in. So I'm lucky if all this work has already been done, I kind of get to do the fun part.
Which is fun, but it's amazing how difficult it can be to get the stories out, because we're all hit with so much on a daily basis, right?
That's right.
We all have so much communication coming to us. So when somebody comes home at the end of the day who's a resident of Bristol or thinking about our surrounding town, how much more do they want to pay attention to? How much more do they want to see? So you have to be very strategic in which avenues you choose, and it's a numbers game at some point too, where you just have to keep funneling this information out there, so when it lands on some soil, it can grow in somebody and say, oh, I didn't know that.
And think of your everyday life. I mean, how many messages do you get? I don't know what the latest count was. It used to be 30 or 40,000 messages hit you in a day, and if you've been working all day and you come home, which areas are you going to spend your time in? People are going to surf Facebook, and they're going to go to different sites, and you get their favorites. We need to make sure Bristol's one of those ones that's always on the list. And what we try to do, you can go to any of these sites, and the things that are going on with Facebook and some of the social medias are very troubling at times. And so there's so many good news stories, and I think that's we have one of the changes you had mentioned of the 22 is we now have a city blog. And I'm not the only one that writes it. We have other people that come in that are involved with the city, and there's going to be a lot more. But we're kind of telling the good stories.
Where is that?
That is on bristolallheart.com, and it says the All Heart blog on there. We've done 3 or 4. We do about 2 a month. We did one about the marketing of the city, but we just did one on a great little organization downtown called Firefly Hollow, and it's a microbrewery. We just did one on the library. Bristol's got one of the most outstanding libraries.
Fantastic.
And I think if you read it, you would say, that's our library. And it's unfortunate, but that's true. So we were telling people, we've got some coming up about how good the housing market is. We're going to have a couple of real feel-good stories that are coming up. Let's not forget all the good, because you can go to different sites or different Facebook page and see all the criticism. And you know what? Everybody's got to get better, and every town has got to get better, and we need to. We need to listen to that. But somewhere you got to go, you know what? I feel good about living in Bristol. I feel good about living in Connecticut, and I'm glad my kids are here. And that's kind of our job. Maybe that's the brand promise. I don't know. But All Heart fits. All Heart fits.
And when there's something that isn't so good, whether it be on the state level or the city level, instead of bailing, it's really important to work together, because that's what makes a community, I think. So, you could say, oh, I don't want to live in Connecticut anymore, and I'm going to go. And that's a choice people have to make, but there's something to be said for, this isn't working, how can we fix it? How can we change it?
You're going to hear, I think, over the, as we get into the years, and it's actually a campaign year in a lot of parts of Bristol and the state. But if we don't work together, we're going to fail. It's just that simple. And I know that tourism is extremely important to the city of Bristol, Farmington, name your town. And there's a lot of challenges to that. Not only competition, but how much funds are there do you spend the funds for infrastructure? Do you bring people here? And I know there's a lot of good things. Yesterday, I was with the Museum Directors Association, the Carousel Museum, Historical Society, and they have seen the importance of saying, we need to work together to make sure Bristol's a good place and to make sure the state doesn't forget us over here. And they've done an outstanding job. And I think those are things that part of my job is to interface with all of these different organizations and say, this is how I can support you, or I've been brought into several different businesses just to look at the business and say, how can I do better? Well, with my marketing background, that's actually a more comfortable zone for me because I'm specializing in small business marketing, and so I can help them. Some have done it, some haven't. That's fine. They know their business, but they have that resource. And so you're almost a counselor and advisor, and they don't have to pay for me. So it's a pretty good idea on that. And I like kind of watching a few of them that we'll see how they do. But again, that's for the betterment of the city. So I think that's part of my job.
That's wonderful. Is there a media strategy that you utilize? I know it's been 90 days here, but
Right.
Have you utilized, or do you have a media strategy?
Absolutely. I mean, it's all comprehensive in the plan, but when you talk about media, that's so encompassing. I mean, I have a crisis communications plan that we look at, and if things really get bad, how do we manage that and make sure we portray everything correctly? But for instance, I'd mentioned Startup Bristol. Well, I was in charge of the marketing of that, so there was a radio component, there was a digital component on that. We placed interviews on the PR aspects. We've started to do billboards, radio advertisements, just about that. That's part of the media. So it's really, what is the strategy that's going to help the prospective business owner, the current business owner, the resident, and then what's the best strategy? Sometimes it is just digital. Sometimes it's just the Facebook. Sometimes it's public speaking. I've spoken to about 7 civic clubs, but it's more of like, this is what we're doing. This is what you are paying for through your tax dollars. So that is, to me, is a part of a media. There's a lot of great volunteer groups in Bristol, and so to go and help them. The Exchange Club, the Mum Festival, there's nothing bigger than the Mum Festival, so how can I help that? The real challenge is how much time can you get, because I'm a one-man band.
Right.
Now I have some support people and certainly great associates that pitch in, which is a characteristic of the All Heart of Bristol. But it's
But you're
one
a
of those
one-man
things
band.
you got to put the priorities and see what can I do the most at, and that's why it's going to be ongoing. So I've done 22. I can think of 122 that it's still got to go.
And here we're talking to you kind of in your infancy of just starting here in this position, so it'll be interesting in a year from now when we sit down together and I say, okay, Mark, where is this now? But in the infancy, when you're going around and you're talking to the civic groups and you're talking to the businesses, what's the common denominator that you're hearing?
I'd better listen, and that's the thing.
Interesting.
I didn't grow up here. And to come in here and think that I can understand Bristol in 3 months would be stupid.
But it's good that you didn't grow up here in a way,
I think
because
so.
you sometimes, and we talk about this as a staff here at Nutmeg TV, when someone new comes in, we embrace what they have to say, because sometimes we're in our own way and we can't see something that's right in front of us. So I think that's a gem that, that you have that vision to be able to come in and see it different. But so you have to listen, but what's the common denominator that you're receiving as feedback that you would say most people are saying to you?
There's a lot of good in Bristol, because the things that aren't right in Bristol, or pick your community, those people are very vocal and they're negative, and there should be a lot of pride in Bristol. And I told the mayor, and I told Justin when I started, I said, look, there's a very limited time I have brand new eyes, and every day my vision becomes a little bit different. And so I knew I thought it was important, and the feedback I've gotten has been very good, in the fact that you have to do that early on, because you're going to get into the routine, and that's the worst thing you can do. And so that's why we made a lot of changes very quickly. I think we were smart in the fact that I really went to a lot of, I call them old timers, but I really mean that experience and not age. And does this make sense to you? And a lot of them were uncomfortable. And I said, that's good. Because if it made you uncomfortable, that means it's change and we're going to progress and it's something we should at least try. It may not be something that we, actually do. But I was doing checks of people that were there and bouncing ideas off. And in fact, there were, in the development of the marketing plan, there were no less than 50 or 60 people that I talked to. And that was current residences, that was people that were in government, they were people who just moved to Bristol. Why did they move to Bristol? What was the perception? Owners, city council people, and they didn't know I was kind of interviewing them about what they thought. I spent one day driving around Bristol with an Uber driver and just sat there and listened and questioned. So I was getting real honest answers, and so I thought that was extremely interesting, and it was data you could not purchase, and because they weren't knowing. They were giving us a lot of good information, and a lot of the plan came from those ideas. I mean, I was able to collate it and say, this is what's good, and this is things that we should keep. In a year from now, I'm going to come back and go, gosh, I wish I'd known that, or I would have tweaked it this way. But we did some things early on in the plan, meaning we set metrics. So we can say, well, we kind of failed here, we did really good here, and surprisingly we did this, but we do now have a benchmark. So in a year I'm going to say, well, I know the 9 things or the 22 things I need to do now, and my guess is they're going to be completely different.
And because you have the experience that you do, you're going to know the value already of those new eyes that you're looking through now, and you're not going to forget that. So I don't think you're ever going to get into the routine. I think you're going to, you're going to develop more and you're going to add more, but you're never going to forget what you first saw and what you first felt when you came to Bristol. And our time is up. I could go another half hour with you. We would hope that you would want to come back and talk to us more about some of the initiatives that are going on in Bristol. I thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Bristol has a gem in you. I'm sure they're very excited about all the things that
Thank
you
you.
have to bring. And for all of us at Nutmeg TV, until the next time, I'm Joanie Sutter.